Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Forum, a weekly program of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, where we cultivate the conversations and connections that drive Columbus forward. I'm Tony Bell, the CEO and Chief Learning Officer for Phoenix Consulting Co., and I'm also a proud board member and lifetime member of Columbus Metropolitan Club. For those of you joining us by live stream, welcome. We're broadcasting from the National Veterans Memorial Museum, and it's right here in the heart of downtown Columbus. So let's start by thanking today's forum sponsors, Deloitte and CODA, and also thank Downtown Columbus, Inc. for providing complimentary parking. Yes, we love free parking, right? It makes it easier to get out. A big thank you to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. We're also grateful to National Veterans Memorial and Museum for hosting us here, and we're glad that this is our home. Every CMC forum is a team effort, so let's give a big round of applause to everyone who makes these conversations happen. So, as greatly anticipated, welcome to this week's forum. This forum is titled Cybersecurity in the Age of AI. Cybersecurity is no longer just an IT issue, it's a leadership priority. Attacks are growing more frequent, more complex, and increasingly driven by AI. That makes every organization, and again I say every organization and every person, a potential target. Today's speakers will outline the newest threats and how AI is changing both attacks and defense and all the steps that we all can take. So we'll walk away with some great takeaways. So please help me welcome today's fantastic panelists, who I might add all have some pretty cool sounding job titles. Let's start first with Kirk Hareth, Cybersecurity Strategic Advisor to Ohio Governor Mike DeWine and Chair of CyberOhio. And another familiar face, Sophia Moore, Chief Innovation and Technology Officer for the Central Ohio Transit Authority, also known as CODA. Michael Wyatt, Global Identity Offering Leader for Cyber and Strategic Risk with Deloitte. And our host, returning once again to CMC, Padma Sastry, Adjunct Faculty for the Ohio State University's College of Engineering. Padma, welcome back to CMC, and we look forward to today's conversation.
Thank you, Tony. Hello all. Thank you again for having me back at CMC, one of my favorite places to speak in town. And the last time I was here, we talked about cybersecurity. We talked about cybersecurity as our enemy and how do we protect ourselves from it. The second time I was on the stage was to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, just about 3 years ago. We talked about what AI is doing as it's proliferating into our lives. And today is special because we get to get the two together. We're going to talk about cybersecurity in the AI world and AI in the security world, cybersecurity world. So I'm privileged to moderate this discussion with our three expert panelists here. And we will explore several things, and how cybersecurity is playing into AI and how AI is playing into cybersecurity. But before I go into the depth of discussion, let me have the privilege of painting a little story for you guys. The first story is, imagine an organization, a regular organization that we all work in, but just 2 different days. Day number 1, your operations center is running very nicely. All the green lights are blinking, the noise is humming, Engineers are doing what they're supposed to do daily. Everything is going great. Until there's a small, tiny flicker in one of the dashboards. Nobody sees this because it is so fast, it's so quick. However, our defense system, assisted by AI, notices this flicker, as tiny as it is, and it leans closer, not physically, but mathematically, it leans closer, looks at the pattern, and knows that it's something out of whack. And it goes and isolates the system, the compromised system, and even before we know what happened, the system has been compromised, the hackers have been isolated, and everything is great. AI as a defender. Imagine the same organization another morning, same operations center, same green lights blinking, same humming noise from all the things. Everything is going great. But somewhere inside, there is an attacker that's corrupting secretly, noiselessly. It doesn't produce a beep. It didn't produce a flicker. It didn't produce any noise. It behaves normally. It behaves in a way such that the AI and the defense system thinks it's normal, and it's just let that in. Now imagine the same AI that was our defender now is also our offender. That's the world we live in today. This is an example of the blind spots that AI may have, that humans may miss, and humans assisting AI or AI assisting humans in order to keep our cybersecurity posture up and uplifted. That said, with those two scenarios, I'm going to start off the discussion with our panelists. And my first question to you guys, and maybe starting with Kirk, is tell us what cybersecurity and AI look like in your world. Because I know the three of you come from different worlds. So let's start with how does it look like? What are the drivers? What's changed? And so on and so forth.
Thank you, Padma. I want to make clear, I am the former cybersecurity strategic advisor to the governor. I retired 4 weeks ago. I was remarking earlier, it's the first time I've shaved in a week. So it is great to be here. I'm gonna try to frame this a little bit. For those of you who aren't tech savvy, to analogize a little bit, those of you who understand what analytics are, what big data was in the early 2000s, I try to analogize because everything sort of builds on everything else in technology and pretty much in life. So AI really is a large language model, and it's highly dependent on data. And data, it can be all data that you feed it. It could be specific data to your network, which is really sort of what we're talking about today from a cybersecurity defensive perspective, which Padma sort of talked about. You have similar governance of these models as you did with big data and data analytics. Data analytics and big data scared the bejesus out of, I'm a lawyer, so we were initially very scared of big data analytics until we really sort of uncoupled it and figured out what it was. It requires you to have good data, so you've got to sort of build data governance in with it. It's heavily privacy. There's a lot of privacy potentials, bad privacy potentials if you don't govern the type of data, the use of data, if you don't keep it segmented into effectively test pens. And then security, right? Who has access to it? Who doesn't have access to it? How do you protect the data that you're using in these models? And then IT governance. You've got to then have asset management. You got to know how to control this. What are the guardrails around who can and can't use this sort of technology? The potential here for anybody, but particularly for cybersecurity, is you can automate a lot of procedures and processes that you are using today, either manual or lower level processes that take a lot of time. You can automate a lot and routinize this with AI. And time is the killer. Time to the problem. Solution is always the biggest problem. You can scale your workforce better. Will there be a time when AI, requires less people? Yeah, probably, right? We're not there yet. But what it does is it scales your existing workforce to larger problem sets. And everybody has there's never enough money, right? And there's never enough people, and there's never enough trained people. So it can take the trained people you have, it can get rid of the routine chores and let them actually do the job, the thinking, using the tools as ways of automating themselves. Create similar uniform processes. Networks tend to be not similar in many respects, particularly in large organizations. And then, as Padma said, the attacks today are automated. I mean, they're coming at us, at light speed. Human beings cannot deal with the asymmetry of having effectively automated attacks coming at you. So what do? You use AI to then defend yourself at light speed as well.
Thank you, Kirk. Sophia?
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, thanks for having me. So as mentioned before, I'm at CODA, and many of you in Central Ohio would know CODA. And I think one of the things that's really interesting as CODA being critical infrastructure is you see our vehicles every day, and you see them perhaps just as buses. What you may not realize is each one of those vehicles is a connected vehicle. We have over 300 vehicles out there that have a router, have a switch, have cameras on them, offer Wi-Fi. All of those vehicles are connected for our customers, so the customers know where those vehicles are, but also for our operations. So when you think about that, you really start to imagine how our landscape has greatly expanded, and the ways that someone could attack us has greatly expanded. When we have these rolling connected vehicles going all around the city, those are opportunities for us to get impacted. So I think a lot of times when you think about CODA or public infrastructure and what the customer is always looking for, you're always looking for more technology, you're looking for where's my vehicle, but all that goes into that and how we could be exposed is really the challenge for us when you think about all of those connected vehicles. Another aspect where I think the audience will be really interested in is that we had a cyber attack in 2022. And one of the things I like to say is, 15 years ago, no one thought someone from another country might be attacking a transit agency in Columbus, Ohio. But that's what they're looking for now, and I think that AI actually accelerates that even more because it really kind of makes it even easier and accelerates all the different ways that someone can attack us. So when you think about public infrastructure, when you think about CODA, those are the things, not only are we trying to figure out how do we get you there, but we're making sure that our system is running safely, that we can continue to provide that service, not only with the vehicles, but also with how do you know where the vehicles are and that we can run our system more efficiently. And those are the types of things where public infrastructure and critical infrastructure has changed because you are expecting that from us, of making sure that we have kept our systems secure. But it's a little bit different than I think when we used to think about critical infrastructure in the past. Of course, we're all about the service and providing that to the Central Ohio community, but we now also have to think about all the ways that someone may attack us. And if transit is not running, then people aren't getting to their jobs. People aren't getting met. All those essential workers, we're proud to say that CODA was running during the level 3 emergency. And that is for our essential workers. And when CODA is not running, those systems aren't running as efficiently either. So it's really important that we continue to consider that and make that one of our focus areas.
Thank you, Sophia. Mike?
Thanks so much. Really appreciate the opportunity, CMC, for allowing us to be here today. So while the title role that you shared, I have the hat that I wear today is I lead our cybersecurity practice for state, local, and higher ed. And governments across the U.S. are really struggling with the cybersecurity problems that you just described, as well as what to do with AI. What to do with AI. And so from the intersection of cybersecurity and AI in public sector, there's really some key considerations. The first is security from AI, and that's dealing with the volume of attacks, right? And so figuring out how to build resiliency into the organization to help withstand the ever-increasing volume of attacks. And the attacks used to be about ransomware. That's still a problem, but critical infrastructure is the growing area that we're seeing a lot of bad activity. And so cybersecurity is having to really up the game to help provide that level of defense, because mission preservation, the ability to deliver critical services to constituents, is paramount. And so there's a lot of pressure there, and as Kirk mentioned, there's never enough money, there's never enough people. And so security from AI involves security with AI, and that is effectively leveraging AI tools to get that force multiplier for the defenders in the organization. And it's really not about displacing jobs, it's about providing the scale required to meet the threat. And the good news is that vendors in the cybersecurity community are adding these capabilities to the tools that are oftentimes already procured, and as they get new updates and so forth, these capabilities come online. The last piece that is a big topic of conversation, and Kirk mentioned this from a privacy perspective and so forth, is security for AI. And there is a real concern that adversaries, and your story was perfect, can come in and take a good asset, a good capability, and turn it to bad. And so there's a lot of focus on how do we, if we're going to use AI, how do we properly protect it? How do we put guardrails around it so that it can do what we want it to do and not what we don't?
So, great question. Especially, I like the fact that you talk more about the security for AI and the AI assist. My question to you guys is, how are you foreseeing the AI growth, and how are you foreseeing cyber? Because both are growing. There are more attacks, more frequent, more complex, and AI is also growing. The technology itself is growing. Where do you see the two growing? Are they going to diverge? Are they going to converge? So we'll start with Mike.
Okay. So I would say that frankly, the maturation of AI capabilities is outpacing, to some extent, cybersecurity. One of the favorite terms of art is agentic AI. And I'm proud to say that I teach a class, I'm an adjunct as well at the University of Texas, and one of my students actually coined that term in her master's thesis. And so agentic AI is where we take the move from chatbots to AI that can actually take actions as if they were a person. And the need to figure out how to control that is a huge challenge. And so a lot of work is being done in that particular area. And what I would say for organizations that are moving into the use of agentic AI is that there need to really be secure guardrails around those tools. Because just as if you have a person that you hire into the organization, you don't give them access to everything. There's segregation of duties. In financial services, we have people that do accounts payable and accounts receivable, and they're not the same person because bad things can happen. The same thing is true with agentic AI and those agents.
Wonderful. So Sophia, I would like you to talk about how this relates to in the public sector. We are serving thousands and thousands of citizens.
Absolutely. I think one of the things, and Mike kind of hit on it, is that AI is outpacing cybersecurity, and I would say it in a kind of a different way. It's amplifying it, meaning that cybersecurity has existed. We all know that it's an issue. But what AI has done is just amplified it more, has made it easier, has made it quicker, has made a lot more different options. And I think that's the challenge, and as we were also saying about critical infrastructure, is that they're being attacked more because they don't think that we have the processes and money, frankly, in place, as you might be compared to private, on all the ways that we can defend. And I think that's a real challenge and a real fear for critical infrastructure, is that how can we defend and against all of these different pieces of AI and all the money that's being spent on it when we're even trying to figure out those guardrails on our own within our organization, let alone how are you going to defend outside your organization. Some of the things that you were talking about with agentic AI is, sometimes even within your internal organization, does everyone have all the right controls of who has access? Now you're taking it to another level with when you're talking about an agent being able to do something like that. And I would say even a third level of that is a lot of times public agencies, we don't build, we buy. So now we're depending on third parties. And now you have third parties that have access to your systems too, and you're really critical on needing them. But then what kind of access do they have? And they may be relying on another fourth party, fifth party. And those are the things that are coming at us very quickly. And again, when you think about something like CODA or another critical infrastructure, people think about the service we offer, but now that service that we're offering now involves so many other aspects that we didn't really have to consider before, and I think a lot of those bad actors know that. And you've probably seen, not just locally, but nationally, how much public agencies are under attack because they know that it is outpacing and it's just a lot easier to attack. And like I said, AI is kind of an amplifier for that.
Thank you, Sophia. So Kirk, I have a specific question for you. You were the cybersecurity advisor for Governor DeWine for the state of Ohio before you retired 4 weeks ago. Tell us about the commercialization and the advent of AI, and how did you factor in all this into your strategy, the growth of cybersecurity, the growth of AI, to mature the state of Ohio's cybersecurity posture?
Well, I was fortunate to join the government at about the time that AI was, I will say, fundamentally being inserted into a lot of the tool sets and the technology that we were either buying, had bought, or what we ended up buying. And what I started out with first was the problem, we had to determine what the size of the problem was. No one had ever sort of been solely in charge of cybersecurity in the state of Ohio. It's a very federated enterprise. Each agency has a director, each agency has a CIO, they all have their own independent budgets. The centralized services at Department of Administrative Services certainly do provide a good set of centralized services, but there's nobody, like Katrina Flory, who's the state CIO, she has a central role. She's the first among equals, but she's not the boss of any of the CIOs in the agencies. So how to knit that together? I brought a third party in, and we did the first ever third party NIST assessment of the state. We identified where all of our gaps were. And then we looked at at what that was going to cost. And I came in, unfortunately, right after a biennial budget. Anybody who understands how state budgeting works, right? It's a 2-year budget. Now, they are big buckets of money, fortunately, because we were able to reprioritize some of it. But none of my priorities were anticipated in that budget. So, we didn't have enough people. We didn't have enough, technology. And the problem set was, growing. So what I was able to do was, the solution really was to find a group of vendors who could help us do what we had been talking about, really, which is to automate more, to do, I call it more with the same, right? We didn't have the luxury of less. The state still does not have as many people as it had for security services as it had before COVID. And yet we were able to move the dial from a fairly low NIST maturity to a very high NIST maturity in about 4 years. And we did it primarily by automating processes through AI, by partnering with vendors who had, effectively put lots of, we'll call it AI or automation into their tool sets to provide us with greater visibility into into our vulnerabilities, patching our vulnerabilities. Incident response became like what was effectively a 5-step process into an automated process that just locked up devices. So we took a lot of risk out of the enterprise. Certainly, there is no perfect security, but we took it from where it was to where it's really in a very good place right now. And it was primarily by leveraging these tools to scale, smart people in the best way possible. And again, we took a lot of the routine, the mundane processes out, and really enabled people to be decision makers based upon the data that they were getting from the tools. But the tools also took some of the guesswork out by more or less, auto patching, finding incidents, stopping them at their root cause as they began. The other thing we did was I was able to be the catalyst for the first ever enterprise-wide data governance program set up by the state. And then we set up the very first AI council, which put guardrails that Mike talked about around the use of the AI, as well as policies, training, and effectively became that asset manager. Like, we just want to know what you're doing with the AI so that we have less shadow AI than, everybody has shadow AI. If you have a phone in your pocket, you have shadow AI, right? So, but teaching people how to appropriately use the tools that they're using or have available to them.
Thank you, Kirk.
Just a quick comment, Kirk. So one of the hazards of being in cybersecurity and AI is we use acronyms all the time. And so for those of you in the audience that are not in this domain or not technologists, the NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. And they provide the frameworks that not only government entities, but many private sector entities use, both for cybersecurity, the NIST cybersecurity framework, and they now have the NIST AI risk management framework. For those business owners out there, I would highly recommend you take a look at those tools that you can determine whether or not it would be appropriate to adopt in your organization.
It's the difference really between, are you doing everything you can, or are you negligent? And again, there's no perfect security, but there's certain indicia that you should follow to make yourself less susceptible to these threats. And NIST, and then the Center for Internet Security, CIS, has another one that some people use as well. But they're basically, a standard of care, like doctors have a standard of care for malpractice. Same thing with the technology industry.
Mike, I have the next question for you. And my question is, Deloitte has been doing this for a while. So you've had, I'm sure, a number of incidents, number of responses, number of security postures, changed, improved, everything. What are the primary trends and lessons that you guys have learned with secure use of AI? I know you referred to that, so talk to us about that.
You bet. So with cybersecurity in general, and even more applicable with AI, there is a need to be prepared for something bad happening. And what we find is you need to practice the response to something bad happening before it happens. Drill the well before you need the water. It's kind of a Texas thing I use. So we don't have a lot of water there. So what we find is that organizations may have pretty good resiliency for natural disaster, or they may have good resiliency and they know what to do if there is a cyber attack on IT systems. What is new is, okay, now that we have AI in the environment, if something happens there, have we gone through the steps? Do we know how to respond so that we have resiliency with the organization and for state governments, mission delivery can continue? And so that's one of the biggest pieces. The other piece is in the use of AI, having a trustworthiness concept. So what are the things you need to do besides downloading ChatGPT and turning it loose on the employee base? Well, there needs to be policy in place, acceptable use policy, user training, understanding that private data using public tools can go into the model and therefore it's no longer private. These kinds of things need to be put in place. And so that's the journey now.
Sophia, so, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Mike was saying. I think what he was saying was a really critical point about doing those exercises. We had our own real exercise. It wasn't just a tabletop. But one of the things I like to mention is, yes, cybersecurity may have been something happened technically, but the impact of it is what happens to you operationally. And that is probably the difference that those exercises can really help you with is, okay, your team might say, we're fine on day one, systems can keep running or operations keep running. What about day 10, right? Systems are down for day 10. For ourselves, as an example, we didn't have email for a couple days. We didn't know, we couldn't have access to all of our vehicles. What does that do to you on day 10? What is that? And some places have it even longer. Luckily, we did not, but some places go 30, 40 days, 50 days. Now you're really involving your operations officer, your CFO, legal perhaps. And I think those are the groups that may not be understanding of what a cybersecurity incident might do because they think it's IT's problem. And yes, the technology piece, we're responsible for detecting and understanding what's going on, but the impact for the organization, that is where everybody gets involved, and that's where we do those NIST exercises in our team. And I know sometimes our team are like, why are we doing this? This doesn't impact me. But a lot of those pieces are because when something does happen, it will impact you and your job every day. And really trying to make sure that people don't think that cybersecurity is just a technology problem. It really impacts your whole operations, and I think that's where exercises like those work. And we did do a tabletop recently, and it was like day 50, things are still not working, and you really start to see how your team's like, oh my gosh, what if we did not have access to certain systems on day 50? What would that mean? And again, AI may accelerate that even more. It may even be more common is the other aspect of it too that is a little frightening.
Kirk, you want
Yeah,
to
I'd
add
just like to add, I will just pile on here on that one of the most important things that I identified and that I worked on, and it wasn't directly under me, but Katrina Flory did a great job of governing and managing it, was to build out a more robust disaster recovery business continuity program. Because this is exactly, ransomware is really defendable against if your backups are all offline and segmented, or in one case here in Ohio, if you actually had turned them on. But you will be down for months if you have to burn down your entire technology stack and rebuild it from scratch. And in many cases, you'll never get the historical data back, right? And so, in the offline, non-digital world, right? We have certain processes that everybody understands around business continuity, disaster recovery. A disaster can be a snowstorm. It can also be a malware. A successful malware attack, ransomware attack, that locks you up for months, and it will put many businesses out of business. If in the public space, they obviously have a draw on the taxpayer, but in the non, but it's still disruptive. It's still disruptive, and it can impact if your police department, fire department are down for some days or weeks. It can affect health and safety.
Thank you so much, everyone. It is CMC's long-standing tradition to take audience questions. So this is where we get interactive. We will move to questions from our live stream and you, live audience, in just a few minutes. Communication, as you know, is a two-way street. If you have a question for our panelists, now is a perfect time to head over to the mic where Doug is at. For those joining us on YouTube, just drop your questions in the chat and Doug will ask that. And panelists, before I turn this over to the audience, I have one last question for a quick response from you guys. What, if any, should be our immediate tactical action that you would advise us?
If you don't have a good inventory of how AI is being used in the organization, go do that like this afternoon. Kirk talked about it earlier. Understanding what's there, the shadow IT concern, it is an imperative. If it's in the IT world, having an asset inventory and then understanding data classification are just foundational. It's foundational for everything, and it's even more important with AI as we allow it to have access to data into systems. So understand what's there now, and then the second, I'll add one other piece. There needs to be policy in place. Policy is a foundation. So starting there are other things like governance and so forth that are needed, but you need to have policy in place, and you need to know what you have, right? So that you can begin to have the guardrails necessary to protect your organization so you can safely use AI.
Thank you, Mike. Sophia?
I would say building security into your purchasing and procurement process. A lot of times when we're working with vendors who may not have technology or have technology, really understanding their cybersecurity practices and how they want to interact with your systems. It's something that we're building right now of how can we make sure with every procurement we understand who our vendors are and how they're using technology and how they're going to use it with us.
Training, 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 and training. This is still a human problem. We humans are still in charge. I don't think the robots will kill us until after I'm dead, hopefully. And therefore, anytime human beings are interacting with technology, there's going to be mistakes. So back to inventories, but train people on how to use the technology, how to use the AI, and then look for ways that the AI can make your life easier.
Thank you so much, everyone. Now we want to hear from all of you. Doug's here, curating questions from our live stream audience, and I already see someone in the line there. Please join Doug, the microphone, if you have a question. Doug, what's our first question?
Padma, thank you very much. Thank you so much to today's panelists for a very sobering conversation. I'll try not to be the CMC employee who clicks on the mysterious link in the email. Training. If you have a question for today's panelists, please do join us here at the microphone. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible. And if you're watching online, please type your question in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible. Great questions at CMC always have two things in common. They can be asked in just about 30 seconds or less, so they're short. And what punctuation mark does a question always end with? They end with question marks. Yes, they do. Always good to remind ourselves of that. I'm going to start us off with this one. How do AI providers like ChatGPT or maybe OpenAI, how do they keep their technology from being misused?
Anyone want to take it?
Well, they have user agreements to the extent people actually read them. It really is up to you as the user to understand what the rules of the game are and what you can and can't do with data, whether or not you own the data, or the data can be used for that specific purpose. So today, outside of in a few states, Colorado being one, where models are actually under more scrutiny, there's very little governance that the AI, that large language model producers do today.
I would say that there is a growing recognition, and not all vendors are equal in this area, and I'm not going to name them, but some have a cultural philosophy of protection more than others. And as you're thinking about which AI tools that you're going to use in your business, I think understanding that is really important. We have seen additional guardrails being added as bad things happen, so it's somewhat reactive. I do know that one of the leading AI vendors has just added a whole new security and compliance team effort because of some things that had happened, so they're reacting to it. So over time, I think the business community will demand more guardrails built into the system, but right now, as Kirk mentioned, a lot of it is caveat emptor, user beware.
Sophia? All right, so let's go on to the next question from the audience.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. David Feldman with S4 Consulting. Given the venue, many combat veterans will talk to you about a sixth sense, kind of an intuition, a human intuition to detect threats in the security environment. The best also see opportunities to advance the mission. So I'm curious if any of you have an example of an organization that combined AI tools with that human intuition to imagine a new opportunity, a new way that the people could advance not only the security mission, but the organization's mission overall. Thank you.
Let me start responding. I remember an author, I forget what the name is, but he clearly says, know your enemy, know yourself. The minute you start to decipher who your enemy is and start to think, because one of the things in cybersecurity, and Kirk can attest to it, is sometimes the enemy is right within our periphery. So that said, I'll open up to real examples that Sophia and Kirk can give.
Yeah, we're working with an organization that was really struggling to scale their monitoring of cyber events in the environment. And what they've done is implemented basically a digital security operations analyst that handles the frontline triage, and that allows the humans to deal with the real threats that are coming through. And I used the term earlier, force multiplier. It's allowed them to scale without having to try to double or triple the staff. And the reason they had to do this was in response to adversaries' increasing volume of attacks, and it was just overwhelming the system. So they've fought fire with fire. And that's one thing about AI. It is definitely on both sides of the equation here. It is our responsibility to effectively use it to defend against adversaries using the same.
Right?
Well, I gave the example of how we used it at the state. It was a force multiplier, to use Mike's term, and I don't think. I mean, one of the reasons I retired is I kind of worked myself out of a job, it's a good place to be, and I was getting bored. So other things to do, but I think the best place still today is to use AI to make your life or your organization's life easier by taking routine chores and letting the AI actually do it for you. I don't know if I've seen anything that's. I have been out of the private sector in the development space, but in the last 4 years, I haven't seen anything that is. I mean, my gut instinct was it was going to help us, and it did. And so I've got that example to prove out. But if you're looking for a specific product or something, it's not part of my world for the last few years.
I can't speak to other areas, but I think one of the things that we're really thinking about is prevention can't be the only way that we're looking at this and attacking this, because it will happen again and it will happen to others. I think where we could use AI, where we're going to have to use AI, is the detecting and the response of it. Is when something does happen, can we detect it? And then how are we going to respond to it? That's where I think where you minimize the impact of the enemy. But the prevention part is going to be harder and harder because of AI. We just need to be able to use those tools to detect and respond from that.
I just have to amplify that a bit. One thing that we see is organizations want to believe that if they just invest enough in prevention, no bad things will happen. This is not the world we live in. So you need to be able to prevent, but you also must be able to detect and to respond and to recover. And the investment needs to be across that spectrum, not front-loaded just on prevention, because there is no perfect security, there's no perfect prevention. Really good point.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, and at least let's try to get to 4 questions, because I've got one here, and I think we've got 3 folks lined up. Steve Reynolds, watching online, says, the city of Columbus was the victim of a well-publicized cyber attack recently. Can any of you speak to lessons learned in terms of prevention or recovery or public relations?
No.
Here's what I would say. It comes back to what Sophia was talking about. You have to know and just accept the fact that in all likelihood, something will happen. And, I like Stephen Covey. Those of you 7 Habits folks, it's not necessarily what happens to you, it's how you respond to it. And knowing how to respond to these things is the critical piece to being able to recover from an adverse event that may happen. And response is not just IT. Response is the whole organization, from executive leadership to legal to PR and communications. Having that plan in place, going through the scenarios, and you have to have all those stakeholders in the room when you do the planning. It doesn't do any good if it's just the CISO and the IT team. It's got to be the full organization. If you plan for it and be able to respond to it, that's one. The second piece is investment in resiliency, so that if the computers do get wrecked, you've got a plan to recover sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to the city of Columbus and what they went through. I can speak to what we went through. And as I mentioned before, I think if you haven't had an incident, having those tabletop exercises of really thinking about what happens day to day. And then going back to what we talked about before with the NIST assessment, I think it's also being really honest about where you may be lacking a little bit in that maturity, and then coming up with an action plan of what you're going to do so. You can't invest in everything. You're going to have to focus on some things more than others. But I think really, understanding where you are and being really honest about that and not trying to hide that, and really creating that culture of openness about what those risk areas are. And I think that's something that I can say I've learned a lot about with my job. Is a lot of it is about talking about risk and where we have risk for the organization. And if we can be really open and honest about that and not try to hide that, I would think that's a lesson learned overall, of just being very upfront about your weaknesses and what we're going to do about it.
And I think also, if you refer back to my second story, imaginary story, you have to pay attention to the blind spots that the AI might have. And that in itself is an exercise by itself. So where could the vulnerabilities lie? Where could the threat come through? And that's what Mike was alluding to, and that's why we have, you've seen those phishing tests that companies do. They'll send you purposely a link for you to click on, and you link it without checking the email address. There you go. That's a perfect example of making sure you're proactive than reactive, because you have to assume that security is going to be hacked somewhere, someplace, but you just want to be ready to respond. Next question.
Jeff Bailey, S&T Bank. Thank you for the conversation. We were kind of talking about this at my table earlier, but sounds like we were being a little more reactive to AI. Now we're trying to be a little more proactive. What I think a lot of people are missing is quantum computing and what are we doing from a government, from a private sector, from academia? That's a whole nother level of AI that I don't think we're prepared for. And if we're trying to be more proactive, I'm just curious to your thoughts of what are we doing now to prepare for it?
There's another acronym. I'll introduce it. PQS, Post-Quantum Security. It's a big, big topic in the cybersecurity community. The good news is that NIST is actually working on standards that will replace the current standards that we use today to keep our private data private. The good news is, unlike AI, the advancement on quantum is taking a little bit longer. It's really expensive, it's really hard, but it is coming, and it is something that organizations, especially financial services, need to think about. And so post-quantum security is, as a matter of fact, there are some discussions here in town later today on this very topic. It's one that has taken off a little slower than I thought it would, but we're seeing growing momentum as there are more announcements about quantum capabilities.
Yeah, we put in a task force, a quantum task force, to start to look at this. I mean, when it comes to quantum, we are all, we're just going to wake up one day and it'll be here. It's always 5 years from whenever you're talking about it. So 5 years ago, they were saying it was going to be in 5 years. Today, if you talk to people, it's 5 years. Eventually, we'll get there, right? And it will be a complete seismic shift. And I think you should have people thinking about it, but like nobody in any state agency in the state of Ohio or any company in Ohio is going to be able to prepare for it in advance, because we don't know what it is, okay? It's literally like an alien thing that's going to come down, and and we'll have to fight it. And the things you can do today, what we did was okay, so encryption is going to be at risk. Where do we start doing an inventory of every place that you do encryption today, right? Every place. and then determine whether or not even today is it good enough, right? A lot of times it's old and needs to be, so there are things that you can do today to get prepared for the future, because a post-quantum world, you're going to need to have post-quantum encryption, and so you're going to need to know very quickly when that is available, where do you apply that in your network and in your applications. And so there are things today, there are planning you can do, but for the most part, we are going to have to be reactive, because none of us, I mean, there's research going on at OSU that I'm aware of, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and others. Everybody's, the government's doing it, but it's a weapon. I mean, whoever invents it first probably wins everything. So, I mean, it's a big deal.
We've got 4 minutes left. Let's try to get to at least one final question.
Hello, my name is Dave Miyamasu. I am from New Relic, and our intelligent observability platform is used for lots of things, but I'm finding state and public entities are using it for AI governance, even though that's not a primary use case of ours. And as I'm hearing your stories, I'm curious if you have any cautionary tales, without naming any names, cautionary tales of AI in the wild, and how some of these mitigations and risks that you suggest we put in place, when those have not been honored or not been protecting, like once AI gets into the wild with these organizations, what stories might you have to tell about some of those things?
I don't honestly have any. We had some concerns early on. That's why we put the AI Council in place. I literally had concerns of people taking ChatGPT and then putting the entire Medicaid database into it without any governance, and to do research on it and then publishing it literally, so you'd have a data breach at scale, which is why we tried to react very quickly. Fortunately, I'm not aware. I'm not aware of any problems of that magnitude. You do find, again, we've just sort of been laissez-faire in a sense that, like, here's the rules to use AI to try to solve problems in your agency. Just let us know what you're doing. Maybe I don't think we use your application, but and we're going to log it and we're going to monitor it, and we'll determine whether or not we think it's okay, and then we just check in, right? So it's a governance, light governance, but it's enabling but putting guardrails around it.
I would say that conceptually, the risk, especially with this agentic AI, is when you have a combination of three things. And I'll use this term lethal trifecta because it's the kind of peak risk situation. One is the AI has access to private information of the organization, confidential information. It has the ability to go and get information off public internet, which oftentimes can be contaminated. And the third is it has the ability to communicate externally. And so when you have the ability to have access to internal information, potentially be poisoned, it's a term where LLMs get poisoned because they go and look at a page that has information you can't see, but the AI can. It gets some instructions and then it's able to communicate out. Those are by doing segregation of duty for AI, you can prevent that situation. So I'm not going to give you a specific example, but I absolutely know of situations like that have occurred.
We have one final question.
Yep, we have a minute and a half left for one short final question.
I'll make it quick. My name's Abdi Isaac. I'm with Uprise. Fantastic panel. I just want to know, education's an amazing way to protect companies from cybersecurity attack. What's something you would tell big or small companies who do not have any procedures or educational systems to protect themselves from cybersecurity attacks?
I would say they need to do an evaluation of, and the NIST one is a good example, of asking yourself questions that you're probably not asking yourself and really evaluating where you are. That would be the number one thing, and really know where your vulnerabilities are.
Find a partner. Find a partner who does that. It's not an advertisement, but somebody like Deloitte or others. There's a lot of consultants out there who have who have good programs to help you.
I think the good news, you said on training, for example, there is a lot of high-quality training that's available at either low or no cost. There's LinkedIn Learning, there's Udemy, there are a lot of good resources out there. I think taking the time to curate that and understand what would be helpful for the organization, that's a good place to start.
Everyone, I wish we had more time, such an interesting topic, but I'm getting the wrap-up signal from my friend Doug here. So let's turn things over to Tony for our closing remarks.
Well, everyone, I hope you found today's session, today's forum titled Cybersecurity in the Era of Artificial Intelligence very real. And I hope that you'll mind all your P's and Q's and all of the acronyms that we have been so blessed to learn about today. So a big thank you to our forum sponsors, CODA and Deloitte. And thank you also to Downtown Columbus Incorporated for today's free parking. And thank you to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness with the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. We are also very grateful to National Veterans Memorial. So thank you so much for hosting us, and a very special thank you to our fantastic panel, Kurt Hareth, Sophia Moore, Michael Wyatt, and our host, Padma Sastry. So I hope you're ready to celebrate next week's forum. Our topic, our fantastic friends, let me do this again. If you're ready to keep exploring this forum for our topics for this week, please visit our fantastic friends, the Columbus Metropolitan Library, for recommended reading, Fake, A Practical Guide to Living in a World of Deep Fakes, Disinformation, and AI-Generated Deceptions by Perry Carpenter. And last but not least, please make plans to join us next Wednesday. Yes, I was jumping ahead of myself. Join us next Wednesday right here for the forum titled The State of Childcare. So important. So thank you again, everyone. We couldn't do this without you. So have a fantastic afternoon. Be warm, be well, and be cyber safe.